back now on This Agriculture Today, and on this segment, we'll get you up to the moment on one aspect of international agricultural programs out of Kansas State University. Falls under the heading of the Feed the Future Innovation Laboratory for Collaborative Research on Sorghum and Millet. It's a mouthful, of course, but it's important work. And our guest will tell us what's happening within that program right now. He is Nat Bascom, Assistant Director of that laboratory. Nat, it does benefit one to explain what these Feed the Future laboratories are in a broad sense, and then we'll narrow it down to your specific work. Would you do so?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So within our federal government, we have the United States Agency for International Development, which does a lot of great work globally. Typically, we think of them as sort of development or relief work. But within that agency, we've had a longstanding funding for collaborative research really support programs that over the last 30 to 40 years have been funded under USAID, which basically tries to leverage the great knowledge and research and teaching that are housed in land-grant institutions around this country and build that into kind of a global initiative to work in some of these, work with really in partnership with these target countries where, in the case of sorghum, which originates from Ethiopia and southern Sudan, and then pearl millet, which originates from West Africa, work with our partners over there to develop their research capacity over time. Also really trying to build, again, this global network so that the crop and that value chain grows globally for the benefit of everybody. And then probably more importantly, we're really about trying to develop really specific, relevant technologies that apply for those smallholder farmers in those countries. And then I can also talk about just what we call the spillback benefits to our U.S. production.
And we certainly would like to get into that, but it does dispel the image of a physical laboratory.
Right, yeah. It's kind
that confuses folks.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad word, actually. We took over this initiative about 8 years ago, and previous to that, they were called collaborative research support programs, and that's a much better term. We work as a management entity right here at K-State. We funded about 15 research projects with global researchers, many of which are led by U.S. principal investigators.
And we do want to get a taste of that research that's been going on of late. But this laboratory is concentrating on two crops of international interest, sorghum and millet, and why those two?
Yeah, great question. So globally, and particularly in West and East Africa and into India and Asia, we estimate about 500 or 600 million people depend on this sorghum and pearl millet as really food security crops. So people in those contexts, this is the food basket. We even estimate 70% of their caloric intake from cereal grains come from these two crops. So very much a part of the food system in those countries. And then I think more importantly, these are often two crops that are grown in very drought, heat, stressed areas. So you're on the edge of some of the most difficult areas to grow cereals and other crops. So you've got real economic poverty, a lot of populations that are very vulnerable, a lot of malnutrition. And so these are just key crops that help support those communities that are very vulnerable economically.
And then your laboratory brings together expertise and skills to address the needs of those potential international consumers of those?
Yeah. So when we started off, we worked really hard to engage with the national teams in Senegal, Niger, Ethiopia, Haiti, around what we would call national prioritization, which is basically a listening session to the researchers, the private industry, farmer associations, women's food processing entrepreneurs. Just what did they want the research to look like, and what was the kinds of technology demand that they had, and document that so that when we started looking for research to push towards development and technology, it's based truly on what the national teams have defined and articulated. So it really is based on that national perspective. But then I think the beauty of it is just that you you leverage in this global A team. I mean, you're getting everything from genomic scientists here in the U.S. that are able to leverage some of those really emerging skills around mapping genomes and being able to identify traits in the different varieties, and then pairing that with very traditional breeding programs in those countries so that the speed at which they can develop improved varieties and hybrids to react to their changing conditions is just that much quicker. So, and then there's also examples of that same global team around food products, around production systems as well.
Hence the phrase collaborative research in the title.
Yeah.
That's why it's there.
Yeah.
So up to the moment here, some of the more recent achievements in the program.
Yeah.
What would you highlight there, Nat?
There's a lot of success stories there, everything from, like we've had a recent release of a kind of a disease-resistant sorghum for Western Ethiopia, which is grown in a higher rainfall area where anthracnose is a disease pressure. So we've been able, through the teams at Purdue and K-State, to identify those key genes that give anthracnose resistance, then pair that into ingressing that in a breeding situation into the sorghums that farmers already appreciate and want in Western Ethiopia, and then actually getting that out to farmer associations. So that variety called Merara has just been released in Ethiopia in the last officially registered, and that has up to a 43% yield gain, which is off the chart, in that context. So big news, and really that comes to bear where it's just actually adding value to the food security of the various smallholders, but it's really now providing production increase to where they can really sell that at market, and that translates into paying school fees or having more money in the pocket. So it's really up the production levels there in Western Ethiopia. So that's kind of one technology, but there's others that have been brought to bear. We've got a seed ball technology using locally produced at the household level kind of golf ball seed balls that are made from a little bit of clay, some ash, organic matter. You put about 10 pearl millet seeds in that, and then you actually plant that seed ball, and that provides a microenvironment to help that seed establishment and plant life in the first 2 weeks of emergence. And so we've seen up to 15% yield gains, and it also allows particularly women to plant those in the 2 weeks before the rains come, so they can get more land planted before that intense period when you do a traditional planting when the rains are right in season.
Plenty of innovation happening here.
Yeah.
Hence the title.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
It all fits together. You brought this up earlier, and we're coming back to it.
Yeah.
That there is a backflow to production agriculture in the U.S. from these efforts abroad.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, great question. So Kansas, we're the number one sorghum producer in the United States. I think we're about 60% of the production. If we look at different pressures that we faced both in Kansas but also in Texas and Oklahoma, just one to mention is sugarcane aphid, which kind of hit us about 5 to 6 years ago.
Broadside.
Yeah, jumped from sugarcane into sorghum, and then moved from the southern United States up to, I think, around Highway 36 northwise in Kansas. Well, we had yield losses big time, and a lot of just issues in terms of harvesting because these sugarcane aphids would just clog up combines and that kind of thing. So we were able, through our international linkages with teams overseas, to find sorghum plant materials and parental lines that had already seen sugarcane aphid, already built up resistance to that, be able to identify that quickly, and then be able to bring that into our U.S. breeding program to where we were able to much more quickly speed up the breeding program in the U.S. to come up with a sugarcane aphid resistance in our hybrid lines here. And we estimated something like $200 or $300 million of savings because of that. So the research has these huge spillback benefits to the U.S. industry.
And the knowledge is generated for all to use, including right here in the U.S. So, Nat, What's next for the program as we're heading into a new year? Are there aspirations in particular or continuing what's going on currently?
Yeah, this leveraging of what we would call genomics-assisted breeding platforms that have been built up by using the skills, the resources, the knowledge, and the capacity in the U.S., pairing that with the national programs in these various countries, have set the scene for improved varieties and hybrids, not only in this next, say, 1 to 2 year period, but really into the next 5 to 10 year horizon.
Good luck with the new year and all of those endeavors, Nat. We appreciate the overview. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
He is the Assistant Director of the Feed the Future Innovation Laboratory for Collaborative Research on Sorghum and Millet, based out of Kansas State University. Nat Bascom, you're listening to Agriculture Today.